All right, here we go. Fourth
Let's get into
movie. You know what? My brother ended up rating The Village 8 out of 10 the other day, which I felt was sui generis. I went 3 stars out of 4. There Will Be Blood is one of the best movies I've ever seen. So I'm here with Caleb Bardis, formerly of the Seth Katzman Show, formerly of the John James Campaign, formerly of well, he was the guy wearing a cowboy hat at the board elections last year.
There you go. That's all. That's all
Which
they
nobody
need.
got, but like 4 people got your campaign. Caleb and I both
Everyone's a critic.
spend our days at a school where satire is often not picked up upon.
Or looked down upon, I'd say. It's
think
recognized, but it's not.
I just
Really,
think,
you'd say it's missed?
Yeah, so this is this is a tangent before we get in this movie real quick. I think to like if a kid does something subversive, you're giving them more credit if you assume that they're attacking society or critiquing society. So they, like, for instance, the women for Bardis poster, like
that one right here.
The more superficial, simple thing, like the not gifted thing, would just be to use a flyer to make a very superficial attack on women, right? But the more creative, comprehensive, like legit thing to do would be to create a series of flyers that all were clearly like riffing on like cliches from propaganda and campaign ads. But no one zoomed out and gave it credit to the context. It's kind of the same thing with the Seth Katzman Show. Controversy, I know, but you should, if anybody's watching this, they should find the Seth Katzman Show. Like, all of the little things were just critiqued in and of themselves, as if they, right? Like the show wasn't looked at in its entirety as being intentionally hyperbolically irreverent. So,
well, of course not. I mean, how could it? It was too obscene. It was too absurd. It was too ahead of his time, almost.
I think the not Seth Katzman Show will have to happen someday. But anyway, There Will Be Blood features Daniel Day-Lewis, who is probably the person I think is the best actor whose entire career I have more or less experienced in my life. It's hard for me to go back and judge someone like Peter Sellers, or, I mean, for a while, even in Peter Sellers' day, like the acting style was different, right? I mean, you look at like Pacino and De Niro and how they're performing and sort of their approach. Meryl Streep too, even like in like the 70s and like maybe even like late 60s, completely different from the level that Daniel Day-Lewis takes method acting to. And some people think it's a little bit too much, but this Gangs of New York, In the Name of the Father, I mean, My Left Foot is good, but it's not one that I want to go back to and rewatch. Lincoln is obviously excellent. So I came to this movie as a Daniel Day-Lewis fan who was super, super excited. I'm not as big on Mr. Director here, Paul Thomas Anderson, as most people are. I think he is a genius, and I think he is an auteur, but I don't like Boogie Nights and Magnolia sort of as much as the next guy. This movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. I went to see it in the ArcLight Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles because I was attending USC at the time. I remember being the only person among my sort of circle of family and friends, other than one brother, who did not think that, like, how to phrase this. Everyone else I knew was convinced that No Country for Old Men was by far the superior film.
Really?
And it's a great film.
I mean, it was a great film. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. It was a great film, but
and unfortunately they're hurt by having points of comparison. But like, this movie is a movie that is epic in a way that movies aren't very often anymore. So anyway, what was your introduction to this movie? When did you first watch it? How'd you come across it?
So I believe we watched a scene in your class back in the 7th or 8th grade. And that was my first introduction to the film. I knew you were a big fan of it, but it wasn't until very recently, actually. I've been on this coronavirus movie watching Scourge, just watching as much as I could because I have a whole bucket list of movies. And this was one of them. And I saw this maybe a week or two ago, and it just got me thinking a lot about the Daniel Day-Lewis uh, method acting. Have you seen Phantom Thread? It's another Paul Anderson
Yeah,
movie.
and I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I I kind of like didn't get what all the fuss was about. I mean, I know that sounds really reductive. Like, I feel like the movie was smarter and subtler than I was on that particular day when I went to the theater. I like his performance for one was so reserved and controlled that it is probably one that will reveal its sort of depth and nuance on subsequent watches. And the screenplay might be really, really good, but it's about this world of fashion and dressmaking in a country and time I'm unfamiliar with. And it didn't really have a ton of exciting scenes. I mean, even just an oil, like a small accident at an oil derrick is made very exciting in the scene. And Daniel Day-Lewis kind of burns with this passion in this movie that wasn't really there in Phantom Thread for me. Did you see it?
I didn't see it, but I've heard pretty much what you've said. Actually, in fact, I've heard more negative opinion about the film, which is interesting because there are some apparent stark similarities between There Will Be Blood and Phantom Thread. But what I have seen was 2012's The Master with Joaquin Phoenix, which is another Paul Anderson film.
I've fallen asleep during that twice. I put that on like a Saturday.
Sort of
twice.
ties in with There Will Be Blood in a sense. Yeah.
Oh, does it? Okay, so I haven't seen it. I know it's sort of roughly analogous to at least archetypal characters and general movements of the founding of Scientology or Dianetics, the creation of Dianetics, right?
Yeah, there's a huge religious fanaticism part, which I could only see comparable to our own Eli from this film. There's a character, and although Eli wasn't as charming, I'd say, as the religious figure from within the Master, I'd say,
which is Philip
there is a
Seymour
lot of
Hoffman, right?
comparison. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty
And
sure.
then Joaquin Phoenix is like an initiate or something. Is this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But
yeah,
no, it's
so yeah. Eli isn't a smooth like Eli makes everyone uncomfortable. I think, like at least everyone watching this movie. So let me just ask that question right off the bat: are Eli and Paul different people?
Yes.
I feel like
yes.
Yeah, I feel like that is the answer, but I feel like there's a thing with doubling in this movie that, like, we've got the brother, so we have Eli and Paul, and then we have the, charlatan, spoiler alert, by the way, everyone, for There Will Be Blood, based loosely on Upton Sinclair's Oil, ! Upton Sinclair was like 50 years ahead of the musical trend of just throwing an exclamation mark at the end of things. And you could have had one at the end of There Will Be Blood, but you get there's two daughters as well. I wrote down like 6 of them, but there's a lot of doubling in this, and the idea of sort of the shadow or the inverse. And Eli and Paul seem like they're deliberately ambiguous. Like we're being winked at as the audience, I think, right?
Well, let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Sorry, I said Caleb's going to run the show here. Caleb's got some natural, some strong editing sense. So he is going to take us through here.
All right. So I think so I have a few scenes actually right here. I think let's just start at the beginning. So the intro, can we play, if we upload this, are we going to get copyright stricken?
This should be fair use. We're
okay.
How long are the clips you're playing?
I'm not going to show the whole clip. Mainly just certain, maybe.
If you're under 30
10-second
seconds,
clips.
there's probably no problem at all.
All right.
And this is criticism, so.
Well, I think we should start with the intro, which I couldn't. Yeah, I could just show it on Netflix. There's no speaking in the first. What would you say, 5-10 minutes of the film? There's no dialogue whatsoever.
Checked. I didn't get up and check the timer, but I really wanted to there is no dialogue until the speech at the town, which was in the trailer.
Yes.
I would say it's 15 minutes easily.
Yeah, 15 minutes. No,
he has an entire hero's journey.
He does.
And my favorite thing about this is where he was a long way away from anywhere, and he shimmied on his back the entire way back to town with that first rock of gold, and he is so satisfied with himself lying on the ground while they're measuring out his gold.
Yeah, as they're giving him the claim to the land.
Yeah, pull up. Let's watch at least 30 seconds of the scene or whatever.
When do you want to start? We can sort of skip around just a bit.
Just play the very beginning. Just play the very beginning,
right.
and then maybe just jump to one of the scenes with the oil. I think that the first thing we see do we get 1898 before we see the mountains?
I don't think so. I was a little confused by the lack of continuity with the time stamping.
Sound design, by the way, amazing in this movie. Was it not Trent Reznor? It was the guy from Radiohead, maybe.
I'm not familiar.
Some pop rock. I'll look it up. Because they're, the central set piece, which I'm sure we'll discuss, with an explosion of a derrick, I think that's the word, has some amazing build of a rhythm track. It is as far away from being on the beat as it can be, and it is so unsettling when it first starts playing, and then as they add the drums in.
That specific track I think you're talking about. You're talking about of course, the soundtrack for the movie.
Radiohead guitarist Johnny Greenwood is who did the score.
There's a specific song. It's actually called Daniel Plainview, and it's the one. It's the very heavy strings that slowly build up. Very similar to Joker with the strings. Very suspenseful, especially when there's no talking. You have these very dusty landscapes. Let me see if I can find a clip here. I'll just skip to this part. Yeah, those strings right there. The suspense building up.
Well, they are another point of comparison would be actually the Joker's leitmotif in The Dark Knight, which is simply a single string on a cello held as long as it can be held. What I loved about the music from the Joker is it was beautiful. It was haunting, it was sad, but those scenes where he danced, the strings that came in when you got all of them, when he fully embraced himself, it was a beautiful piece of music. Interesting short tangent. In the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, the whole universe is created when Iluvatar, which is basically Uranus or God or the prime mover, sings a song, and this one dude Melkor solos and goes off of the sheet music, and then God is now you're gonna see, he doesn't stop him. He's now you're gonna see what you've done, and the entire physical world in Tolkien's realms is a physical manifestation of the song. So
wow.
Yeah, there's so basically Gandalf is a melody from a song that the gods sang to start things. We see those mountains at the beginning and get those strings and just immediate tension.
There's a great, actually, let's not skip around too much. I'll go back to the slide now that we sort of have an introduction.
Yeah, so so you want to outline just the basic plot of this prologue, or I will?
Yeah, You can add. I can add a little bit after you say something, or however you want it.
Yeah, so we got 1898 is when we start, and we've got Daniel Plainview out in the middle of the desert. It looks like, I mean, I'm assuming he's in Southern California, but it could be New Mexico, it could be Arizona, and it could be Nevada. It's
I don't think he's in California.
What?
I don't think he's in California because wherever he was, or maybe since it's a different scene, I guess it could be completely different. But guessing
when he traveled all whatever.
Yeah, assuming that
he's
in the same area that he was when Eli approaches him, because he asks, "Oh, where is it? California?" Like if it was somewhere very far away. So I assume they're maybe definitely in some Midwestern state.
Oh, really? No, it's got to. I think it's got to be Southwest. I'll look it up later, but it looks like New Mexico of the states that I've been in. I don't know where there was gold in 1898 though. It's interesting. So I like the first thought I had is like he's a little late on the gold rush, which is interesting because he's not late on the oil. Like he never is. It's interesting. He seems a little desperate at the beginning. He's working by himself. We see him fairly methodically and exuding a sense of frustration, trying to sort of chisel away and find gold down in this shaft that he's sunk. We get a nice Chekhov's dynamite stick shot in the foreground. And then he sets up this whole dynamite thing to go. And he's a little nonchalant about like getting out of there and hoisting up his tools. And the explosion seems to catch him off guard, which is great foreshadowing parallelism for the end of this prologue.
Mm-hmm.
He goes down and the ladder has been compromised by the explosion. And he falls and breaks one of his legs. But his first and only concern is, where are you? He says something like, there you are. And he spit shines this rock that I couldn't even tell had that much gold in it, and hauls himself back up. And then we kind of pull out this great boom shot as he is sliding on his back with like one kind of in like a can opener position with a broken leg, off to go turn in this gold, and then probably find a doctor afterwards. He looks really contented when the gold is counted out, and we see him get what maybe is, this is like that first dollar bill that he had framed on his wall, right? Looks like he's getting about $320 or something.
Yeah, something along those lines, which actually makes me beg the question, what was his occupation before this? What's his backstory? And maybe that's left ambiguous on purpose, of course, to create this sense of mystery around this ruthless businessman. But I would like to almost see who his father was. And I'd like to look into his family life. Was his dad as cutthroat as he turns out to be? Was his dad sort of was his dad controlling and almost unloving of him?
Well, I feel like I'm trying to remember. We know from the story that
his stepbrother. We know a little bit
because the fake brother has done his homework. So he says he's a half brother by another mother. Mm-hmm. So the dad left. His dad presumably left his mom, or his mom died. I don't know that we know which.
Well, that's interesting. Wait, not to throw off the conversation, but there's a scene when he's talking and he's trying to buy some land, and he has HR and the family asks where his mother is, or if he has a wife.
Oh,
and
she died in childbirth. It's just me and the boy now. Yeah.
So, but maybe it was his own mother who died in childbirth, and he's using that as a cover story.
Some guilt. I mean, I think we're supposed to think that he is never going back home. He's from Minnesota, right? Fond du Lac or something. Like, he's gone from the the little house in the big woods to the little house on the prairie, and he clearly is like never looked in to find out if his relatives are still alive. He's kind of never turned back. I would love like a graphic novel of like the prequel where he's like getting into saloon fights or, like trouble, past the Mexican border, like during the war, like who knows what he's been doing. He seems to be the kind of man that when he sets his mind on something and determines to do it, there aren't really any moral or ethical issues that are going to get in the way.
No, he goes where the money is. But I'm. Have you seen Billions?
No.
There's this great scene. One of the characters is very wealthy, powerful individual, and he's talking about money to this one lawyer, and he has this, I think, $50,000 maybe in his hand, which is a lot, of course, a lot of money. And he lights it on fire, and he says, "It's not about money. Money is nothing to me. It's just a way of keeping score." So maybe for
Yes.
Daniel's character, it's all about keeping score. It's all about uh, trying to compensate for something he might have felt guilty for doing, which is leads me to the sort of conspiracy that it was his own mother who died in childbirth, giving birth to
Yeah,
him.
he's either got the guilt from that. I mean, these would be the two most likely, or he feels like his dad was a bum, or his dad didn't provide, or maybe mom died, dad went out with, like, wife number two, and because there was a sister that was referenced, but there's something that he will be eternally compensating for him. I mean, there's that famous line where he says, I don't know what it is. I have a competition in me.
Yeah.
I must see others. Like, he openly says, I mean, it's interesting. The fake brother is sort of essential for his greater awakening, because he confessed to the fake brother that, like, he wants to win, he wants to crush other people, and he doesn't really know why or what to do about that. What he doesn't have that the average person would have is a sense of shame about it and a desire to suppress that to fit in with society.
Yeah, well, I like that idea that he has something inherent about him in his blood. There will be blood. The
Mm-hmm.
movie of you can take blood for to be a metaphor for oil, which I'll
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
accept. Absolutely. But I think blood is more literal in a lot of the film because he usually confides in people he sees as his own blood. HR, which of course isn't his own blood, which I think that's at the end, that's what leads him to send him off to boarding school, is because, oh, you're not my, along with the hearing issue, but it's sort of, you're not my own blood. And the same
Well,
thing with his brother, half brother.
yeah, I think so. The brother one is interesting, and I'd never, until you just said that right now, I'd never thought of them as sort of escalations of the same kind of, like, phony family member who is in a way kind of a leech. There is a truth to the fact that as soon as HW is no longer helpful, and let's be honest, HW is a kind of a simpleton, or he's terrified of his father, one of the two at the beginning of the film. He's really slow to respond to questions. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's hard for me to get a read on exactly, like, whether Daniel thinks he will contribute as an adult to some family company, or whether he is simply a prop who's being well fed and sleeping well and going along. I guess what I never considered, and I never thought this twist would be significant until I got to the end, is he clearly never told HW the truth about his dad, who's the guy who dies in the second part of the prologue, by the way. After the gold, we see him with now a small crew of people, very, very crudely, pun intended, getting oil out of the ground with sort of buckets. And he designs this rig system, and there's a baby on site with one of the men. Who knows what happened to that mom? And when that man dies, we see Daniel Plainview sort of consider what to do about the baby, struggle to maybe try and give it a bottle, and then there's kind of a bonding scene on the train. But I never stopped to think, oh, I wonder if HW knows that he's adopted, for lack of a better word. And when we get the bastard in a basket line where he tries to sort of cut emotional ties with him at the end of the film, that was the first time I realized it. I think Daniel cares about HW, and I think that he knows that that's a flaw, and I think he cuts that off. I think that because he wants to get him a teacher, he tries to bring the teacher there. He runs and takes care of HW first. He does then leave him with someone else to go
Yeah,
into the other
I was going to bring that
disaster,
up.
but I think he really does care. I mean, HW lights a bed on fire, screams all through the night. Uh, it's a difficult situation. Um,
No, you're
uh,
completely right.
HW. Okay,
Yeah.
so you want to talk about the that first. So after this death, he takes the baby. He's on a train with the baby, and we actually get a fairly long audio overlap here of the first several sentences of his oil man speech to a town, and then we cut to a shot of a close-up on Daniel Plainview, kind of in the darkness with a hat on, with kind of a grin on his face, as he is giving his spiel, as it were, telling the town why they need him.
Because he's wearing a robe, it's very casual.
I mean, he probably lives in the house. This is probably his like manservant, but like the same thing that Fletcher was. It's his like consigliere. It's his Mr. Smithers.
I'm finished. And there we go. With
it's interesting,
concerto.
he just got a screenplay with that written. You could, on the surface, you could read that as him realizing that this is going to be the thing that does him in. He just murdered a guy in his house.
I'm finished.
Yeah. But no, I think it means building his empire. Like that's the last thing he had to do was destroy the false god, right?
He's been planning it since the beginning, right?
Yeah, in this narrative, it isn't that God has to be defeated, because that would be the normal tragedy, right? Would be the classic mythological tragedy, flying too close to the sun, taking fire to man, would be a demigod or a human challenging God and getting their comeuppance. But here, he wins out over what he has correctly identified as a false god.
He rooted out the evil. He became the third revelation.
Yes, yeah. Give me the blood.
So what would you give this movie?
This is 4 stars out of 4. I would probably have a difficult time coming up with 10 movies. What is it? What did we say this was? 2005?
2009.
Oh, 2009. Wow. I would have a hard time coming
2007.
up with, okay. I would have a hard time coming up with 10 movies from between 2001 and 2020 that I have seen in theaters that I think are better films. And I say film deliberately because it's very sort of metaphorical and thematic, and it's very much about tone and atmosphere and symbol and sort of the feels. Whereas I've probably seen movies that maybe have more well-rounded, better performances from a full cast, or better individual set pieces, maybe. Cinematography and sound design, though, this is well up there.
Almost definitely.
And for me, sorry, and then I'll let you give it your rating. For me, what makes this movie transcendent is it's a world in and of itself. I feel the same way about a movie that I think is deliberately of a lesser quality, a solid 3-star movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like that Indiana Jones world in that one, in The Lost Crusade, and in the better James Bond films, you get this too, feels like a self-contained universe that actually will hold up and will extend over time and is sort of in a way timeless. This is like the 2001 A Space Odyssey of the, I don't know, capitalistic Western or something in a way.
Yeah.
Lawrence of Arabia, you could compare this to.
I can't argue with that. The guy who did all the cinematography for the movie, I think his name's like Robert Elswit or something. He also did the cinematography for Nightcrawler.
Oh wow!
I think Jake Gyllenhaal was in that.
Yeah, I saw that in theaters. I got to rewatch that. I'd forgotten about that.
Super good movie, and like you said, I think that's another one of those films that will stand the test of time, just because of how. I mean, it's such a shocking film, and I don't know how long it's been since you've seen it. It's been quite a while since I've seen it, but I just remember it being so intense. On the same level as this movie, where it's can be very passive at times, but
I think it's got the same thing of that unnerving, and I don't remember the music or the sound design from that movie, but I remember it's like always night, obviously Nightcrawler, and he is so unnerving and socially awkward in a way that it's hard to figure out if that lead character is aware of how kind of perverse his interests and behaviors seem to other people. Taxi Driver is my best point of comparison. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I have not, but after I saw the Joker,
Nightcrawler it has a lot of similarities. So last thing here, I'm going to pull up Paul Thomas Anderson, just because I feel like I'm not remembering some of his movies. Okay, Hard 8 I haven't seen. Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood. Saw all those. Have not yet seen The Master. Did not see Inherent Vice, but saw Phantom Thread. What is Inherent Vice? Joaquin Phoenix, Josh Brolin, Owen Wilson, Benicio del Toro, Reese Witherspoon, Martin Short. Budget of $20 million, box office of $14 million.
Oh, wow.
It's about a private investigator in 1970. It looks like kind of a spoof.
What did you say this was?
Noir. Sorry, go ahead.
What did you say this was?
Inherent Vice, 2014. So this was nominated Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay. Let's find out what else.
Oh, Robert Elswit also did the cinematography for this.
Ah, nice. Yeah, a lot of people had it as their top movie of the year.
Didn't know Owen Wilson was in it.
I think it definitely would have been my top movie of the year, but I want to find the accolades. Let's see if it was nominated for cinematography and sound. Best Picture, Best Director. It won Best Actor. Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Art Direction. It won Best Cinematography. Best Film Editing, Best Sound Editing.
I'll have to check that out. I'll probably watch that right after this is over. Honestly, I've been looking for something to watch as of recent because my list is running pretty short.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, the last thing I want to do is let's throw out some ideas there for, I don't know, in a few weeks or so when I run out of original guests or you're feeling up to another one.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do with people is what would be like 180 degrees away from There Will Be Blood? What would be the exact opposite kind of movie?
Well, I'd have to think about that.
Like
well,
a comedy?
Opposite. It would have to be a comedy, but it would have
or like a kids movie, like an animated movie, or a document. Well,
you can have opposite in what regard? Because you can have something. I mean, immediately when I think of the opposite of There Will Be Blood, I would think of a comedy or a children's movie, something that's not on the level.
How do you feel? How do you feel about the Bee Movie?
Oh, I love that movie.
Oh, good. Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah,
because that's got the profit and the whatever stuff going on too, and that's a movie that I was convinced was awful when I watched it the first time, and I want to rewatch it and reassess the transition from second to third act and see if it maybe isn't just a little bit smarter than I gave it credit for.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, Caleb. Thank you to anyone and everyone who stayed with us here. There Will Be Blood is a movie I would recommend to anyone and everyone. There are some scenes that might be upsetting. What's it rated R for? Just the two kind of murders? There's not really any language.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't seem like there's...
It's an adult movie, though. I mean, a kid's not going to even want to sneak into this. They're going to go see No Country for Old Men. So,
yeah.
All right, Caleb, we'll get some rest. We'll catch you next time.
All right. Thank you, Patrick.
Ciao.